The stars sang their ancient songs across the void, and Captain HFY listened with perfect contentment. His ship, the melodic dawn, drifted through space like a crystal flute floating on invisible currents. The vessel's hull curved in smooth, flowing lines that caught starlight and transformed it into gentle harmonies that filled the corridors. HFY belonged to the Kithara, a people who spoke in musical tones and saw the universe as one vast symphony. His crystalline skin shifted, colors with his emotions, currently glowing a peaceful blue-green as he monitored his ship's sensors. For 300 years, he had served the Galactic Confederation as a diplomat, helping to maintain the great song that kept 73 different species living in harmony. The Confederation had existed for over 10,000 years without a single major war. Conflicts were resolved through careful negotiation, like musicians tuning their instruments before a performance. Even the rare times when violence occurred, it followed ancient patterns that all civilized species understood. Combat was an art, form, with rules and ceremonies that protected honor while minimizing actual harm. "Captain," called his communications officer Lithera, her voice creating soft chimes in the air. "We are receiving unusual sensor readings from the edge of the Terran system." HFY's skin flickered with curiosity, pale yellow notes dancing across his features. The Terran system was listed in their records as containing only primitive life forms. The dominant species had barely discovered fire when the last survey probe visited their world 5,000 years ago. "What kind of readings?" he asked. Lithara's song took on puzzled harmonies. "A vessel, Captain. But the design matches no known architecture in our databases. It appears to be constructed from metal alloys arranged in angular geometric patterns." This was interesting. First contact with a new spacefaring species was always a momentous occasion. HFY felt his skin brightening with anticipation. "Set course for the Terran system. Begin preparing the first contact protocols." The melodic dawn turned gracefully through space, its engines humming a low, pleasant note that would be audible to anyone within 1,000 kilometers. This was intentional. No civilized species would approach another vessel in complete silence. That would be considered terribly rude. As they traveled, HFY reviewed the first contact procedures that had served the Confederation well for millennia. First, they would approach the unknown vessel while broadcasting mathematical harmonies. These demonstrated intelligence and peaceful intent. Any spacefaring species would understand prime numbers and musical intervals. If the newcomers responded appropriately, the next step would be artistic exchange. The melodic dawn carried recordings of the finest music, poetry, and visual art from all 73 Confederation species. In return, they would receive samples of the new species' culture. Finally, if all went well, formal diplomatic contact would begin. The aliens would be invited to join the great song, adding their voice to the galactic harmony that had kept peace for so long. 3 days later, they reached the edge of the Terran system. The unknown vessel hung motionless in space like a dark, gray mountain turned on its side. HFY studied it through his main viewer and felt his skin shift to confused orange hues. The ship was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the melodic dawn. But where his vessel curved and flowed like a living thing, this stranger was all straight lines and sharp angles. Weapon ports dotted its hull like angry eyes, and thick armor plating covered every surface. It looked like it had been built for war. "How strange," murmured his science officer Kelnthy. "The design suggests a species that expects frequent combat. But surely any race advanced enough for interstellar travel would have moved beyond such primitive thinking." HFY nodded agreement. Perhaps these beings came from a harsh region of space where pirates were common. The Confederation had dealt with such situations before. A few years of proper diplomatic guidance usually helped newcomers understand that violence was unnecessary when civilized discussion could solve any problem. "Begin the greeting protocol," he ordered. The melodic dawn broadcast its first message across space. Mathematical concepts flowed in perfect musical intervals. The first 10 prime numbers expressed as a haunting melody, followed by geometric relationships rendered as harmony, and finally, pi calculated to 100 decimal places in a complex symphony that took nearly an hour to complete. Then they waited for a response. The alien ship remained silent for several minutes. When it finally answered, HFY nearly fell from his command chair in shock. The transmission was harsh and mechanical, consisting of sharp bursts of radio energy arranged in rigid patterns. No music, no art, no elegance whatsoever. It sounded like metal grinding against stone. "What are they trying to communicate?" asked Lithara, her skin cycling through distressed purple shades. Kelnthy worked frantically at his console. "The patterns appear to be some form of digital encoding, Captain. Extremely primitive, but I am detecting mathematical sequences within the noise." "Perhaps they are simply inexperienced with proper communication protocols," HFY suggested, though his own skin had shifted to worried amber tones. "Try to interpret their message and respond in kind. Show them how civilized species conduct themselves." For the next several hours, the two ships exchanged increasingly complex transmissions. The Cathera tried to teach the aliens about musical mathematics, while the mysterious vessel continued broadcasting its harsh digital codes. Each attempt at communication only seemed to make the situation more confusing. Then everything changed. Long range. Sensors detected 3 ships approaching from deeper in the system. HFY recognized their configuration immediately and felt his skin flush deep red with alarm. Scarran pirates. The criminal organization had plagued the outer edges of Confederation space for centuries, but they had never been detected this far from known trade routes. "Captain, the pirate vessels are increasing speed," reported his tactical officer. "They will reach us in approximately 20 minutes. HFY nodded calmly. Pirate encounters followed well-established procedures, just like everything else, in civilized space. First, the pirates would broadcast their traditional challenge, usually accompanied by boastful poetry about their fearsome reputations. Then his ship would respond with its own formal rejection, often including artistic criticisms of their poor verse structure. This would be followed by ritual combat, with both sides maneuvering in complex patterns while exchanging limited weapons, fire. The goal was not to destroy the opponent, but to demonstrate superior skill and courage. Usually, whichever side proved more artistic in their fighting techniques would be declared the winner, and the loser would withdraw with dignity and tact. Pirates might be criminals, but even they understood proper protocol. The 3 Scarran vessels approached in the traditional triangular formation, their hulls decorated with the elaborate paintings that marked them as members of the Crimson Claw clan. They were beautiful ships, despite their owners' illegal activities, flowing lines, elegant weapon arrays, and hull modifications that served no purpose except to look impressive during combat displays. Their leader, probably Captain Vorthak, based on the ship's distinctive markings, broadcast the expected challenge. His message followed ancient patterns, comparing his crew's bravery to various natural phenomena and insulting the Cathara ancestors in creatively rhyming verses. HFY prepared his formal response, drawing on classical diplomatic training, to craft an appropriately scornful rejection. This was actually somewhat enjoyable. Few things were more satisfying than defeating pirates through superior poetry, but before he could transmit his reply, everything went wrong. The unknown alien vessel suddenly moved, not the graceful maneuvering of civilized spaceflight, but sharp, aggressive acceleration that violated every principle of proper space travel. Weapon systems that had been hidden beneath its angular armor plating suddenly extended like the fangs of some metallic predator. "What are they doing?" whispered Lithara. The alien ship was positioning itself between the melodic dawn and the approaching pirates, but this made no sense according to any known protocol. First contact situations were not supposed to involve third parties, and certainly not criminal ones. HFY watched in growing horror as the newcomers charged their weapons to levels that would have been considered unsporting in any civilized engagement. Energy readings suggested they were preparing to use lethal force against opponents who had not yet even begun the formal combat dance. The galaxy's ancient song suddenly seemed very fragile indeed. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable and watched the 3 unknown vessels approach through the darkness. Her ship hung in space like a sleeping giant, 2 kilometers of armored steel and advanced weapons systems representing humanity's first serious attempt at deep space exploration. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, reported Lieutenant Martinez from the tactical station. 3 vessels, unknown configuration. They're not responding to our hails. Sarah nodded grimly. The past few hours had been the strangest of her 20-year military career. First, they had encountered that bizarre ship broadcasting what sounded like space music. Her communications officer had described it as mathematical concepts set to a waltz, which was certainly a first for Earth's contact protocols. Now 3 more ships were closing on their position, and their behavior patterns suggested hostile intent. Sarah had not spent 15 years fighting colonial wars and pirate raiders just to be caught unprepared by alien bandits. "Shields up," she ordered. "Charge main batteries to 50% and get me a tactical analysis of those approaching vessels." The Indomitable was built for war. Earth's governments had learned hard lessons during the corporate conflicts that nearly destroyed the outer colonies. When they finally developed faster-than-light travel, they made sure their first deep space ship could handle any threat it might encounter. Heavy armor plating protected vital systems. Fusion reactors powered weapons that could crack asteroids in half. Point defense systems tracked thousands of potential targets simultaneously. The crew of 800 had trained for combat scenarios that ranged from boarding actions to full fleet engagements. "Analysis complete, Captain," reported Commander Torres from the science station. "The approaching vessels show energy signatures consistent with armed spacecraft. Estimated weapons capacity is primitive by our standards. Hull construction appears optimized for maneuverability rather than protection." Sarah studied the tactical display. 3 ships moving in a triangular formation approaching at moderate speed. Their designs were elegant and flowing, with decorative elements that served no obvious tactical purpose. They reminded her of artwork more than warships. "They could be merchants with defensive armaments," suggested Lieutenant Commander Park, her executive officer. "Or maybe this is some kind of local patrol." "Maybe," Sarah agreed, but her instincts told her otherwise. She had seen pirates before, during the Titan incident and the Europa campaign. These ships moved with the confidence of predators who expected easy prey. The strange musical ship continued broadcasting its harmonious signals, apparently oblivious to the approaching danger. Sarah found herself in the uncomfortable position of being the only heavily armed vessel in the area, while 3 potential hostiles closed in on what appeared to be a defenseless alien craft. "Captain," called Ensign Rodriguez from communications, "the musical ship is broadcasting again. This time the pattern is different, more complex." "Put it on speakers." The bridge filled with an ethereal melody that seemed to dance through mathematical progressions. Despite the strange circumstances, Sarah found it genuinely beautiful. The unknown aliens clearly had a sophisticated understanding of both music and mathematics. "It's almost like they're trying to have a conversation," murmured Commander Torres. "Each transmission builds on the previous one, adding new elements and themes." Sarah was about to respond when her tactical officer interrupted with sharp urgency. "Captain, the 3 approaching vessels have increased speed and are powering weapons systems. They'll be in range in 4 minutes. Through the view screen, Sarah watched the elegant alien ships begin to glow with energy patterns that pulsed in complex rhythms. The musical vessel responded by shifting its own lights in what looked like synchronized patterns. Even its movement through space seemed choreographed. "I think we're about to witness some kind of alien combat ritual," she said quietly. "Maintain defensive posture, but do not interfere unless directly threatened." But as the minutes passed, Sarah realized she was watching something that violated every tactical principle she had ever learned. The musical ship was not taking evasive action. Its weapons, if it had any, remained powered down. Instead, it continued broadcasting increasingly elaborate musical compositions while performing what looked like a slow-motion ballet. The 3 attacking ships responded in kind, their formations becoming more complex as they approached. Weapons fire began to exchange between the vessels. But it was unlike any space combat Sarah had ever seen or studied. The energy beams followed precise patterns, creating light shows that were genuinely artistic. Ships would fire, then pause, to allow their opponents to respond with equally decorative displays. "This is insane," muttered Lieutenant Martinez. "They're fighting like it's a dance competition." Sarah agreed. The combat was following some kind of ritualized pattern that prioritized style over effectiveness. Both sides seemed more concerned with creating impressive visual displays than actually damaging their opponents. But then something went wrong. One of the attacking ships, possibly by accident, scored a direct hit on the musical vessel's engine section. The elegant craft shuddered and began venting atmosphere through a hull breach. The ritual combat immediately stopped. The three attackers regrouped and began closing for what was obviously intended to be a finishing blow against the now disabled victim. Sarah Chen had spent her entire adult life in the military. She had fought corporate raiders, colonial separatists, and criminal organizations across 3 star systems. She understood the difference between a formal duel and cold-blooded murder. "All hands, battle stations," she announced calmly. "This is not a drill. The Indomitable came alive like a waking predator. Fusion reactors cycled to full power. Weapon systems that had been dormant for months suddenly bristled with deadly energy. Point defense arrays swiveled to track potential threats." "Captain," said Commander Park urgently, "we don't know the political situation here. These could be local law enforcement dealing with criminals." "Then why aren't they trying to capture the disabled ship?" Sarah replied. "And why did they wait until their opponent was helpless before moving in for the kill?" She studied the tactical display one more time. 3 armed vessels preparing to destroy a single damaged craft that was no longer capable of defending itself. The mathematics were simple, regardless of species or stellar coordinates. "Target the lead vessel," she ordered. "Fire a warning shot across their bow. If they continue their attack, we engage." The Indomitable's main gun, a particle cannon designed to punch through heavy capital ship armor, sent a stream of coherent energy past the nose of the lead attacker. The beam was powerful enough to vaporize a small asteroid, and its passage through space left a brief trail of ionized particles. The 3 alien ships immediately stopped their advance and turned toward the human vessel. Sarah could almost feel their surprise and confusion. They had probably never encountered weapons that powerful before. "They're powering up their weapons systems and moving toward us," reported Martinez. "All 3 vessels are changing course to intercept." Sarah looked at the tactical readout. The alien ships were beautiful, artistic, and completely outclassed. Their weapons were designed for ritualized combat, not serious warfare. Their hulls prioritized grace over protection. They moved like dancers, not soldiers. "Final warning," she broadcast on all frequencies. "Cease hostile actions and withdraw immediately. This is your only chance." The lead alien ship responded by firing what appeared to be its main weapon directly at the Indomitable. The energy beams struck their forward shields and scattered harmlessly across the deflector arrays like rain on a windshield. Sarah felt a familiar coldness settle over her thoughts. It was the same feeling she had experienced during the siege of Ganymede Station, when enemy forces had threatened civilian evacuation ships. Some situations left no room for negotiation or mercy. "All weapons, free fire," she commanded. "Eliminate the threats." What followed was not combat in any sense that the aliens would have understood. It was extermination. The Indomitable's weapons systems had been designed by a species that had spent centuries perfecting the art of killing their own kind. Particle beams capable of melting battleship armor tore through decorative hull plating like paper. Kinetic projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed turned elegant spacecraft into expanding clouds of debris. The lead attacker died first, its reactor containment failing under focused fire from 3 different weapon systems. The explosion lit up local space like a small sun. The second ship tried to flee, but guided missiles caught it before it could build sufficient velocity. The third vessel managed to launch what might have been a distress call before it too was reduced to component atoms. The entire engagement lasted 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Silence returned to space. The musical alien ship drifted. Quietly, its damaged engines finally stabilized. The Indomitable powered down its weapons and resumed a peaceful stance. "Open a channel to the surviving vessel," Sarah ordered. She found herself hoping that the aliens would understand basic mathematics, since music apparently hadn't worked very well. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Chen of the Earth ship Indomitable. The hostile forces have been neutralized." Captain Zephi floated in the medical bay of the melodic dawn, his crystalline skin flickering between deep purple and shocked white. The ship's doctor, Venth Ara, hummed healing frequencies while tending to his injuries, but even her most soothing melodies could not calm the chaos in his mind. Nothing in his 3 centuries of diplomatic experience had prepared him for what he had just witnessed. The alien ship, the angular gray mountain that had seemed so crude and barbaric, had just destroyed 3 Scaran vessels in less than 5 minutes, not defeated them in honorable combat, not outmaneuvered them in artistic display. Destroyed them completely, reducing elegant spacecraft and their crews to nothing more than glowing debris scattered across space. "How many survivors?" he asked weakly. Venthara's song took on somber tones. "None, Captain. The human vessel left no wreckage large enough to contain life pods. Their weapons appear designed for total destruction rather than disabling enemy craft." HFY closed his eyes and tried to process what that meant. In 10,000 years of Confederation history, space combat had always followed civilized patterns. Ships were damaged, crews were captured, honor was satisfied. Even the worst pirates observed basic rules of engagement. You fought until someone was clearly beaten, then you accepted their surrender and went home. These humans had made no attempt to communicate with their opponents. No challenge had been issued, no terms offered, no opportunity for withdrawal given. They had simply appeared, identified a threat, and eliminated it with mechanical efficiency. "Captain," called his communications officer from the bridge, "the human vessel is broadcasting again." HFY forced himself to return to the command center. His crew looked at him with expressions of shock and confusion that probably matched his own. Through the main viewer, the human ship drifted peacefully. In space, its weapons powered down as if the recent violence had never occurred. "What are they saying?" he asked. "The transmission is in their harsh digital format, but our computers have made progress in translation." Lithara's voice carried confused harmonics. "They appear to be asking if we require assistance with repairs or medical aid." The absurdity of it struck HFY like a physical blow. These beings had just committed the most efficient act of destruction he had ever witnessed, and now they were offering to help tend their victims' wounds. "How do we respond to that?" whispered his tactical officer. It was a fair question. Confederation protocols had procedures for every conceivable situation in space, but no one had ever imagined meeting a species that could casually annihilate 3 warships and then immediately offer medical assistance to strangers. "Send a basic mathematical greeting," HFY decided. "Nothing complex, just let them know we are alive and capable of communication." The response came quickly. The human transmission was brief and direct, lacking any of the artistic flourishes that marked civilized discourse. But embedded within the digital noise, HFY could hear something that made his skin shift to worried yellow. "They are asking for permission to approach our vessel," Lithara reported. "They say they have medical supplies and engineering equipment that might help with our repairs." "And if we refuse?" "The message indicates they will maintain distance and await our decision." HFY considered his options. His ship was damaged and stranded far from Confederation space. His crew needed medical attention that their own facilities could not provide, and despite their terrifying combat capabilities, the humans seemed genuinely concerned for their welfare. But allowing an unknown alien vessel to approach would violate every safety protocol in the diplomatic handbook. "Signal them to maintain current distance," he decided. "Tell them we appreciate their offer but need time to assess our situation." Over the next several hours, HFY learned more about humanity than he had ever wanted to know. His science. Teams analyzed the debris from the destroyed pirate ships, trying to understand what kind of weapons could cause such complete devastation. The results were disturbing. Human energy beams operated at power levels that would have been considered wasteful by Confederation standards. Their kinetic projectiles moved fast enough to punch through any known armor. Most troubling of all, their targeting systems had achieved perfect accuracy against multiple moving targets, while their own ship maneuvered at combat speeds. "Captain," reported Kelnthy from the science station, "I have completed analysis of the human vessel's construction. What did you find?" "Their ship appears to be built entirely for warfare. Hull thickness is nearly 3 times standard specifications. Energy generation capacity exceeds our own by a factor of 12. Weapon placement suggests they expect to engage multiple opponents simultaneously from all angles." HFY felt his skin cycle through alarmed color patterns. "What kind of species builds ships like that?" "One that expects frequent combat, Captain. The design philosophy suggests a race that views space as an inherently hostile environment requiring maximum defensive and offensive capabilities." This revelation prompted another disturbing realization. If the humans built all their ships to such military specifications, what did that say about their home system? How dangerous was their region of space that they needed such overwhelming firepower just to travel safely? Sir, interrupted his communications officer, we are receiving a priority transmission from Confederation Command. They want a full report on our first contact situation. HFY stared at the message for several long minutes. How could he possibly explain what had happened? How could he describe watching 3 ships and their crews simply cease to exist in the space of a few heartbeats? He began dictating his report, struggling to find words for concepts that had no place in civilized vocabulary. Weapons that prioritized, destruction over capture, combat that ended in total victory rather than honorable compromise, aliens who offered medical aid immediately after demonstrating the capacity for genocide. When he finished, the bridge fell silent. His crew had heard every word, and their expressions reflected the same mix of horror and fascination that he felt. "Captain," said Venthara quietly, "what happens now?" It was the question that had been troubling HFY since the moment the human ship had opened fire. The Confederation had spent millennia building a civilization based on harmony, cooperation, and the peaceful resolution of conflicts. They had created a galaxy where violence was ritualized, limited, and ultimately meaningless. But now they had encountered a species that treated violence as a tool to be applied with surgical precision for maximum effect. Beings who had apparently never learned that combat was supposed to be an art form rather than a solution to problems. "I do not know," he admitted, "but I suspect the galaxy is about to change." As if summoned by his words, another transmission arrived from the human vessel. This time, the message was longer and more complex. Their translation systems worked frantically to decode the alien concepts. "They are requesting permission to establish formal diplomatic contact," Lithara reported. "They say their government wants to discuss peaceful relations and mutual cooperation." HFY almost laughed at the irony. Here was a species that had just demonstrated weapons capable of exterminating entire civilizations, and they wanted to talk about peace. But perhaps that was the most frightening thing of all. These humans seemed to view their devastating military capabilities as perfectly normal, even routine. They had saved his ship from pirates not because they sought glory or honor, but because they considered it the right thing to do. What kind of universe had they come from, where such power was used, so casually in service of protecting strangers? "Send a response," he decided finally. "Tell them we accept their offer of diplomatic contact, and prepare a message for Confederation Command. Tell them to expect visitors who will change everything we thought we knew about intelligent life in the galaxy." The melodic dawn limped toward the edge of the system, escorted by the gray mountain that had become their unlikely savior. Behind them, the expanding clouds of debris marked the spot where the galaxy's 10,000-year song of harmony had finally encountered a discordant note it could not accommodate. HFY suspected it would not be the last such encounter. Ambassador Prime Lyrian of the Ethereal Collective stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Voice and watched Earth grow larger through the transparent aluminum viewport. The blue and white planet looked peaceful enough from orbit, but intelligence reports suggested a more troubling reality. The scars were visible even from space. Atmospheric burn patterns from ancient nuclear exchanges, the geometric shapes of massive defense installations scattered across the continents, orbital platforms that tracked their approach with sensors powerful enough to map every rivet on their hull. "Preliminary scans complete, Ambassador," reported Captain Thelorias from behind her. "The planet shows evidence of multiple large-scale conflicts throughout its recent history. The current population appears to have survived at least 3 separate periods of global warfare." Lyrian's ethereal form shimmered with concerned silver light. As the Confederation's most experienced diplomat, she had been chosen to lead the first official contact mission to humanity. The reports from Captain HFY had been disturbing. An entire species that viewed overwhelming military force as a standard diplomatic tool. "How many orbital defense platforms?" she asked. 47 that we can detect, Ambassador, possibly more hidden by stealth technology. Each one appears capable of destroying capital ships." The mathematics were sobering. Most Confederation worlds maintained perhaps 3 or 4 defense stations, mainly to deter pirates. Earth had built a network that could hold off a major fleet invasion. What kind of species felt the need for such extensive fortifications around? "Their home world? Incoming transmission," announced the communications officer. The humans are offering to escort us to a diplomatic facility on their moon. Their moon? Lyrian had studied the preliminary reports, but this was a new development. Apparently, they have constructed a substantial base there. Our sensors indicate artificial structures covering nearly 12% of the lunar surface. Lyrian accepted the escort offer and soon found herself following 3 human vessels toward Earth's satellite. The escort ships were smaller than the Indomitable, but still heavily armed by Confederation standards. They moved with military precision, maintaining perfect formation while scanning space around them for potential threats. The lunar base was even more impressive than the orbital defenses. Vast industrial complexes sprawled across ancient crater floors. Manufacturing centers that appeared to be producing spacecraft at rates that would strain entire Confederation sectors. And everywhere, the distinctive angular architecture that marked human construction. "Ambassador," whispered her aide, Counselor Vesithara, "how did they build all of this so quickly? According to our records, they achieved spaceflight less than 2 centuries ago." It was a troubling question. Most species required millennia to develop significant off-world infrastructure. Humans had apparently managed it in a fraction of that time, while simultaneously fighting wars that should have crippled their technological development. The diplomatic facility was located in a pressurized crater near the lunar South Pole. As their shuttle descended toward the landing pad, Lyrian observed defensive positions built into the surrounding ridges. Even their peaceful meeting location was protected by enough firepower to level a small city. She was greeted by a human delegation led by Admiral Chen, the same officer who had commanded the ship that destroyed the Scaran pirates. The woman was shorter than Lyrian had expected, with graying hair and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of her surroundings. She walked with the confident stride of someone accustomed to command. "Welcome to Luna Base, Ambassador," Admiral Chen said through the translation devices both sides now carried. "I hope your journey was comfortable." "Thank you, Admiral. Your facilities are impressive." Chen smiled. "We believe in being prepared. Please allow me to show you around." The tour that followed was both fascinating and terrifying. The humans had built their lunar base as a combination industrial center, military installation, and research facility. Production lines churned out components for warships. Testing ranges evaluated weapons that could crack asteroids. Training facilities prepared soldiers for combat in every conceivable environment. "Your people seem very focused on military applications," Lyrian observed carefully. "Survival tends to encourage that focus," Chen replied. "Earth has never been a peaceful place, Ambassador. We learned early that the universe is full of things that want to kill you. The trick is making sure you can kill them first." They paused in front of a display showing human expansion into space over the past century. Red markers indicated colonial settlements. Blue markers showed mining operations. Yellow markers, disturbingly numerous, marked the sites of armed conflicts. "So much warfare," murmured Counselor Vesithara. Admiral Chen turned to look at her directly. "You say that like it's unusual. How does your species handle territorial disputes, resource competition, ideological differences?" "Through negotiation and compromise," Lyrian answered. "The Confederation has maintained peace for 10,000 years using diplomatic protocols that ensure all parties benefit from any agreement. And what happens when someone refuses to negotiate? When they want everything and offer nothing in return?" The question hung in the air like an uncomfortable silence. Lyrian realized she had no good answer. In Confederation space, everyone eventually agreed to talk because the alternative was social isolation. But what if you encountered someone who didn't care about being part of galactic civilization? "The pirates you destroyed," she said finally. "Could they not have been captured and reformed?" Admiral Chen's expression hardened. "Ambassador, those pirates were preparing to murder a disabled ship and its crew. In our experience, people who are willing to commit that level of atrocity are rarely interested in reform. But surely there were alternatives to complete destruction." "There were," Chen agreed. "We could have allowed them to complete their attack and then negotiated for the survivors. We could have tried to disable their ships and risk them escaping, to prey on other victims. We could have attempted to reason with beings who had already demonstrated their willingness to kill innocents." She paused and looked directly at Lyrian. We could end the immediate threat and ensure those specific. Pirates would never hurt anyone again. We chose the option that guaranteed the safety of innocent beings. They continued the tour in thoughtful silence. Lyrian observed training facilities where human soldiers practiced combat scenarios that seemed to assume the worst possible outcomes. Ship construction bays building vessels designed to fight outnumbered and outgunned. Research laboratories developing weapons that prioritized effectiveness over elegance. Everything about human civilization suggested a species that had learned to view the universe as fundamentally hostile. They prepared for the worst-case scenario. In every situation, built redundancies into every system, and maintained the capacity for overwhelming violence even while pursuing peaceful objectives. "Admiral," Lyrian said as they concluded their tour, "may I ask about your personal philosophy regarding conflict resolution?" Chen considered the question carefully. "I believe in peace, Ambassador. I've seen enough war to know how terrible it can be. But I also believe that peace is only possible when good people have the power to stop bad ones." "And who decides which? People are good and which are bad?" "Usually the bad ones make that pretty obvious," Chen replied grimly. "They're the ones shooting at hospitals, enslaving populations, or destroying ships full of diplomats for sport." That evening, Lyrian composed her preliminary report to the Confederation Council. She struggled to find words for what she was beginning to understand about humanity. They were not evil. They were not even particularly aggressive by comparison to some species she had encountered. But they were utterly ruthless in their willingness to use violence when they believed it was necessary, and their definition of necessary was much broader than anything in Confederation philosophy. More. Troubling still, their approach seemed to work. Human space was remarkably free of pirates and raiders. Their colonies reported minimal crime rates. Their diplomatic missions were never attacked by hostile forces. Fear, Lyrian realized, could be as effective as harmony in maintaining order. The question that kept her awake that night was simple but profound. What happened to the galaxy's 10,000 years of peaceful civilization when it encountered a species that had never learned to fear anyone? She suspected they were all about to find out. 1 year after first contact, Captain HFY stood on the bridge of his new ship and marveled at how much the galaxy had changed. The Crystal Harmony looked similar to other Kithara vessels from the outside, but beneath its flowing hull lay technology that would have been unthinkable just months before. Human-designed shield generators hummed with alien efficiency. Weapons systems that prioritized destruction over artistry sat beside traditional ceremonial armaments. Most shocking of all, the ship's tactical computer had been programmed with human combat doctrines that treated warfare as a problem to be solved rather than a dance to be performed. "Status report," he requested, his crystalline skin shifting to determined blue hues. "All systems operational, Captain," replied his new tactical officer, Lieutenant Crendall. The young Kithara had volunteered for additional training at the Human 8 lunar facility, returning with knowledge that disturbed traditionalists but impressed military analysts. "We are approaching the coordinates where the merchant vessel Gentle Current reported pirate activity." HFY nodded grimly. The Scaran Collective had become increasingly desperate since their encounter with human firepower. Unable to prey on well-defended targets, they had begun attacking civilian ships with renewed viciousness. 3 Confederation merchant vessels had been destroyed in the past month, their crews murdered despite offering no resistance. In the old days, such attacks would have prompted formal protests and lengthy diplomatic negotiations. Pirate clans would eventually agree to pay reparations and reduce their activities in exchange for continued recognition of their territorial claims. It was an imperfect system, but it maintained the balance that kept galactic civilization stable. The humans had introduced a simpler approach: find the pirates and destroy them. "Contact bearing 32 Mark 7, reported his sensor operator. "Configuration matches Scaran assault craft. They appear to be pursuing a civilian freighter." Through the main viewer, HFY watched a scene that had played out countless times across Confederation space. A sleek pirate vessel chased a lumbering merchant ship, firing warning shots and broadcasting demands for surrender. The freighter's captain would eventually comply. Cargo would be transferred, and both ships would go their separate ways. Pirates satisfied, merchants alive, honor preserved. Except this time, things would be different. "Open a channel to the pirate." Vessel, HFY ordered. Channel open, Captain. Scaran vessel, this is Captain HFY of the Confederation ship Crystal Harmony. You are ordered to cease your attack on the civilian freighter and withdraw immediately. The response came. Quickly, delivered in the traditional boastful poetry that pirates favored. Captain Vorthak, apparently having survived his encounter with the Indomitable, compared HFY's parentage to various unpleasant stellar phenomena while describing his own fearsome reputation in elaborate verse. 6 months ago, HFY would have responded with equally artistic insults, and the ritual combat dance would have begun. Both sides would have maneuvered elegantly while exchanging limited weapons fire until someone achieved a symbolic victory. Today, he simply said, "Final warning. Withdraw, or be destroyed." The pirate ship immediately opened fire, its energy beams, painting decorative patterns across space as they approached the Crystal Harmony. The attack was beautiful, following classical formations that had been perfected over centuries of ritualized combat. It was also completely ineffective against human-designed shield technology. "Return fire," HFY commanded. "Full power." The Crystal Harmony's main weapon, a human particle beam adapted for Cathara power systems, spoke once. The pirate vessel simply ceased to exist, vaporized so completely that not even debris remained to mark its passing. The merchant freighter, apparently shocked by the sudden end to their predicament, broadcast confused thanks before jumping to hyperspace. HFY understood their reaction. A year ago, such decisive action would have been unthinkable. "Sir," called his communications officer, "we are receiving a priority message from Ambassador Prime Lyrian. She reports that the Scaran Collective has formally requested peace negotiations." HFY felt his skin shift to satisfied yellow patterns. 3 months of systematic pirate hunting by Joint Confederation human task forces had apparently convinced the criminals that their traditional lifestyle was no longer sustainable. "Send our acknowledgement," he replied. "Tell the Ambassador Prime that the hunting grounds are clear." The phrase would have meant nothing to him a year ago. Now it carried implications that reached far beyond simple pirate suppression. The galaxy's balance of power had shifted dramatically since humanity's arrival, and not everyone was comfortable with the change. Ambassador Prime Lyrian had spent months traveling between Confederation worlds, explaining the new reality to species that had grown comfortable with predictable threats and manageable violence. Some embraced the human approach enthusiastically, others worried about the implications of introducing such lethal efficiency into galactic politics. The Ethereal Collective had formally protested the militarization of space, arguing that human weapons violated the spiritual principles that had governed Confederation civilization for millennia. Several other species had echoed similar concerns, calling for restrictions on human military technology, but no one could argue with the results. For the first time in centuries, merchant-ized ships traveled safely through formerly dangerous regions. Colonial settlements no longer lived in fear of pirate raids. Even the most remote outposts enjoyed a level of security that had been unimaginable under the old system. "Captain," interrupted Lieutenant Crandall, "I am detecting another distress signal. Grid reference 77 Alpha. A cargo hauler reports. Engine failure and requests assistance. Set course and engage at maximum speed," HFY ordered. A year ago, responding to such calls had always carried the risk of walking into pirate traps. Today, with human-designed sensors and weapons, his ship could handle any reasonable threat. As they traveled toward the distress signal, HFY reflected on the broader changes sweeping across Confederation space. Trade routes had been reorganized around security considerations rather than artistic preferences. Diplomatic protocols now included emergency procedures for dealing with species that refused to negotiate. Ship designs increasingly prioritized function over form. Most significantly, the concept of warfare itself had been redefined. Combat was no longer an art form to be appreciated, but a problem to be solved. Victory was measured not in artistic merit, but in the complete elimination of threats to innocent life. The galaxy's ancient song continued, but it had gained new verses that spoke of strength rather than harmony, protection rather than compromise, and the willingness to use overwhelming force in defense of those who could not defend themselves. Some called it corruption of traditional values. Others described it as evolution. HFY preferred to think of it as growing up. They reached the distressed cargo hauler and found exactly what their sensors had indicated, a genuine emergency requiring routine assistance. No pirates lurking in nearby asteroid fields, no elaborate traps designed to capture unwary rescuers. Just honest beings in need of help, confident that it would arrive quickly and effectively. As his crew worked to repair the freighter's damaged engines, HFY received another transmission from Confederation Command. Admiral Chen was requesting permission to establish a permanent human base in the Rigel sector, ostensibly to coordinate anti-piracy operations, but obviously intended as a long-term presence in Confederation space. The request would undoubtedly generate heated debate among member species, but HFY suspected it would ultimately be approved. Whatever concerns existed about human methods, no one could deny their effectiveness. A year ago, Captain Vorthak and his pirates had been a constant threat to peaceful shipping. Today, they were negotiating surrender terms from what remained of their scattered fleet. The galaxy's song had indeed changed. It was no longer the pure, harmonious melody that had echoed through space for 10,000 years. It now included discordant notes, harsh rhythms, and themes that spoke of conflict rather than cooperation. But it was also stronger than it had ever been before. For the first time in Confederation history, the innocent could travel safely while the guilty faced consequences that were swift, final, and utterly without appeal. As the Crystal Harmony departed from the rescued freighter and resumed its patrol route, HFY listened to the new song and found it beautiful in ways the old melody had never been. It was not perfect harmony, but it was honest harmony, one that acknowledged the existence of evil and maintained the strength to oppose it. The galaxy's song had not died. It had simply learned to sing in a human key.